Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic, and as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. Here are tonight's news. First to Hong Kong, people are detained and searched in Hong Kong on the 23rd anniversary of its handover to China and a day after a sweeping new security law was imposed on the city by Beijing. Take a look. This is the annual event steeped in symbolism. It marks 23 years since Hong Kong was handed over from Britain to China. Beijing enacted a security law Tuesday that punishes succession and other crimes with up to life in prison. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam, a pro-Beijing appointee, attended the traditional flag-raising ceremony in the morning in a square where a giant billboard hailing the new law had been erected. Helicopters flew past carrying a giant Chinese flag and a smaller Hong Kong flag as the March of the Volunteers national anthem was played. Meanwhile, dozens were detained and searched as a small group of protesters gathered in the city center. Take a look.
Here to witness suddenly overnight there's a sudden transition from the one country, two systems. Then now overnight there one country only.
我冇預算到香港會沉淪得咁快，即係喺過去1至2年之間，即係特別上年嘅社會運動，再今年加埋疫情，我冇諗到會係快刀斬亂麻咁嗱咁就通過咗個法案。
After this long battle of protests, the Hong Kong government and the Beijing government still not listening to the voice of Hong Kong people, and they still highly suppress the freedom of speech, freedom of press, like all kinds of freedom in Hong Kong. It's really a shame that the law has passed.
The one country, two systems formula initially helped cement the Hong Kong status as a world-class business hub bolstered by an independent judiciary and political freedoms unseen on the mainland. But critics have long accused Beijing of chipping away at that status and described the new security law as the most brazen move yet. More than 24 countries, including Britain, France, Germany, and Japan, urged Beijing to reconsider the law, saying in a statement to the UN Human Rights Council that it undermines the city's freedoms. Meanwhile, Hong Kong police made some arrests as the city greeted the anniversary of its handover to China with renewed protests. Police arrested more than 180 people, of which 7 violated the new law. China imposed a sweeping security law on the city, a historic move decried by many Western governments as an unprecedented assault on the finance hub's liberties and economy. Take a look.
I think very obviously the purpose of law is to change Hong Kong from rule of law to rule of fear. So every day when people in Hong Kong wake up, they have to think, what should I say today? Should I come out to march? As a teacher, what should I teach my school children? As a parent, what should I do with the future of my future generation? Of course, we can understand, that we may be the target. And of course, we do not want to go through the secret police interrogation, go through jail. But I think we have to psychologically prepare for that, since, as I've said, we will continue our activity, to confront the national security law.
The new law outlaws subversion, secession, terrorism, and colluding with foreign forces to undermine national security with sentences of up to life in prison. China will have jurisdiction over serious cases, and its security agencies will also be able to operate publicly in the city for the first time, unbound by local laws as they carry out their duties. Inciting hatred of China's central government and Hong Kong's regional government are now offenses under Article 29. The law can also be broken from abroad by non-residents under Article 38. And this could mean that foreigners could also be arrested on arrival in Hong Kong if they are suspected of breaking this new law. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam, a pro-Beijing appointee, rejected concerns the law will end Hong Kong's freedoms. In her speech on Wednesday, she said the law will not undermine Hong Kong's judicial independence and high degree of autonomy and won't affect the Hong Kong people's freedoms and rights. The Hong Kong pro-democracy lawmakers has voiced their concern as Beijing's new national security law took effect in the city. Take a look.
But my advice to the Hong Kong people is do not let fear be driven into your hearts, because this is exactly what they want to do, drive fear into the hearts of the Hong Kong people who aspire for freedom and democracy. Because if you let fear dominate you, your soul and your heart, then they will win. I usually say a few words in English to the international community and the media, but now I can't because of this law. If I say anything to you, I'll be arrested when I walk out of this building. You should.
Free press could just be announced dead in Hong Kong because anyone giving or disseminating any material or information privately to a journalist, and this journalist would publish information obtained in such a manner, could be in dire trouble, both of them, because they could interpret it as saying you are harming China's national security. When they say day is night and dark is light, you just can't argue because they are the law. But this is not the rule of law. This is not even rule by law. This is rule by decree, because anything is up to their interpretation.
The UN Human Rights Council said that it undermines the city's freedoms. Beijing says the law will restore stability after a year of pro-democracy protests and will not end Hong Kong's freedoms. Critics have little faith in those assurances given how similar national security laws are routinely used on the mainland to crush dissent. The law is a response to huge and often violent pro-democracy protests last year. Millions took to the streets while a smaller hardcore of protesters frequently battled police in vicious confrontations that saw more than 9,000 arrested. Meanwhile, Britain said China's new security law for Hong Kong was a serious violation of the former British territory's autonomy guaranteed under a 1997 handover deal. Let's listen in.
Well, we've very carefully now assessed the contents of this national security legislation since it was published last night. It constitutes a clear violation of the autonomy of Hong Kong and a direct threat to the freedoms of its people, and therefore I'm afraid to say it is a clear and serious violation of the joint declaration, the treaty between the United Kingdom and China. We will honour our commitments to the B&O, advice to them, but what I would say is that we fought very hard and we negotiated with the Chinese back in the 1980s to have the freedom for peaceful protest and freedom of expression to be respected. China, through this national security legislation, is not living up to its promises to the people of Hong Kong. We will live up to our promises to them. Well, I think you'll see the action that the international community has taken. We spoke out, the United Kingdom led a group of 27 states in the United Nations Human Rights Council yesterday evening in Geneva. We will continue, as we have done previously, work with the G7. Obviously, China is a leading member of the international community, and it is precisely because of that that we expect it to live up to its international obligations and its international responsibilities. I think for trust in China's ability to do that, today has been a big step backwards.
Britain on Wednesday extended Hong Kong residents' immigration rights after calling China's new security law for Hong Kong a serious violation of the former UK territory's autonomy. Prime Minister Johnson said London had warned Beijing that it would introduce a new route for those with British national overseas status to enter the UK, granting them the right to live and work in Britain and then to apply for citizenship. Britain's new offer applies to an estimated 3 million Hong Kongers, but Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab refused to be drawn about how many would take up the offer. Mr. Raab said Hong Kongers with BNO status and their dependents would be offered the right to work or study in Britain for 5 years. They would then have the right to apply for settled status and then possible citizenship. He also said there would be no quotas for the settled and citizenship route in what he called a bespoke immigration system for Hong Kong. He said China had not only broken the joint declaration, but its own basic laws on Hong Kong and international obligations to respect autonomy and rights in the territory. Hong Kong's sovereignty was handed back to China by Britain in 1997, and certain rights were supposed to be guaranteed for at least 50 years under the One Country, Two Systems agreement. Again, UK Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab could specify extended rights for people eligible for BNO passports offered to Hong Kong citizens born before 1997. Take a look.
Honourable Lady, for the government's this week. What I've committed already to this House, I'll come to this House and make sure all honourable members can be updated, not just on what we'll do on BNOs, which I can confirm we fully intend to see through, but any other action we want to take with our international partners.
Now, speaking before Mr. Raab, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said Britain now will extend the immigration rights in response to China's passing of a controversial new national security law in Hong Kong. Let's listen in.
We made clear, Mr. Speaker, that if China continued down this path, we would introduce a new route for those with British national overseas status to enter the UK, granting them limited leave to remain with the ability to live and work in the UK and thereafter to apply for citizenship, and that is precisely what we will do now.
Residents of the territory with British national overseas status will now be able to come to the UK to live, work, and eventually apply for citizenship. Hong Kong was handed back to China in 1997. Anyone born before then is eligible to apply for a BNO passport. Around 300,000 people currently hold one, but an estimated 2.9 million people are eligible. Meanwhile, China slammed the international criticism over the controversial new national security law for Hong Kong, saying other countries should just keep quiet. Beijing officials have rebuffed the criticism. Take a look.
有中央的坚强有力的领导和举措，有全国人民，包括香港同胞，广泛的支持和拥护。这部法律的公布和施行，一定能够有效的维护香港特别行政区的国家安全。
而这部法律本身就是继香港基本法之后，中央为香港专门制定的第二部重要法律。
Donald Clark, an expert on Chinese law at George Washington University, wrote in an analysis that if you've ever said anything that might offend China or Hong Kong authorities, stay out of Hong Kong. A major cause of concern, Clark said, was Article 38, which states national security offenses committed overseas, even by foreigners, can be prosecuted. Eagle News will be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB rating.
Mga kababayan, naharap na naman po tayo sa mabigat na pagsubok na ito. Ito yung COVID-19.
I hope everyone's okay. I hope everyone's safe.
Nandito po kami para hikayatin pa po kayo na maging matibay.
Mas maging matatag po tayo and just stay positive po sa lahat po ng nangyayari ngayon.
Mga mahal kong kababayan, lampasan po natin, pagtagumpayan po natin ang pagsubok na ito.
Stay strong sa panahon po na to.
Huwag tayong mawawalan ng pag-asa.
At inihikayat din po namin kayo na sana makinig po tayo sa ating gobyerno.
Sumunod muna tayo sa gobyerno dahil yun yung pinakamainam na paraan para hindi na lumagana pa yung virus.
Let's all stay at home.
Spend time with our loved ones, with our families.
At higit po sa lahat, make sure to pray. Pray for everyone. Pray for everything that is going on right now. Especially our frontliners po who are sacrificing their lives to take care of everything.
Higit sa lahat, patuloy tayong lumapit, magtiwala at manalangin sa ating Panginoong Diyos.
Lagi tayong manalangin dahil yun po ang may pinaka-mainam na solusyon sa lahat po ng mga problema natin.
God bless you and your family. Please stay strong and keep our faith.
Tuloy po ang laban.
Hello, my name is Robin, and I'm 5 years old. My mom and dad said many people are getting sick. That is why we have to stay at home. That is why I cannot go to school. I cannot play outside, and I cannot even visit my friends. We can only go outside if we visit the doctor, or if we need to buy some food. And when we get home, we have to wash our hands. While I'm at home, I do my homework, clean up my toys, help cooking our food, and help my parents with their work. Please stay home so we can all play together again. Bye!
Says the best defense is still containment.
We are in uncharted territory.
I can hold you 450. If I hold you 100%. Sacrifice. Constructioning.
The United States could see 100,000 new coronavirus cases a day, according to top U.S. infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Let's listen in.
We can't just focus on those areas that are having the surge. It puts the entire country at risk. We are now having 40,000+ new cases a day. I would not be surprised if we go up to 100,000 a day if this does not turn around. And so I am very concerned.
Alarming spikes in new cases in southern hotspots, Texas and Florida, are driving the daily national total of new cases to over 40,000 per day, and they need to be tempered down quickly to avoid dangerous surges elsewhere in the country. The testimony comes as the U.S., the world's hardest hit nation, with more than 2.6 million infections, was left off the list of 15 countries to which the European Union will open its borders from July 1, and as it grapples with how to assure a safe reopening of schools in the coming months. Fauci said he believed some states are skipping over some of the checkpoints that assure safe reopenings of business and public spaces. And he also offered a blunt message to the nation's young adults who have engaged in dangerous behavior, including congregating in bars, not wearing masks, and not following social distancing guidelines. Take a look.
I think we need to emphasize the responsibility that we have both as individuals and as part of a societal effort to end the epidemic, that we all have to play a part in that. There is no guarantee, and anyone who's been involved in vaccinology will tell you, that we will have a safe and effective vaccine. But we are cautiously optimistic, looking at animal data and the early preliminary data, that we will at least know the extent of efficacy sometime in the winter and early part of next year. But even in states in which the leadership, in the form of the governors and the mayors, did it right with the right recommendations, what we saw visually in clips and in photographs of individuals in the community doing an all or none phenomenon, which is dangerous. And by all or none, I mean either be locked down or open up in a way where you see people at bars not wearing masks, not avoiding crowds, not paying attention to physical distancing.
Dr. Fauci, along with Dr. Redfield, the Director of Centers for Disease Control, urged Americans to recognize the part they have to play in the fight against the virus. As the country is seeing a surge of the number of cases, the U.S. recorded 1,199 fatalities from the virus over the past 24 hours. As the country's death toll began to climb again, the Johns Hopkins University tally showed Tuesday the number of daily deaths had not exceeded 1,000 since June 10. The country has suffered 127,322 deaths overall, according to the Baltimore-based institution as of 8:30 p.m. The U.S. also registered 42,528 new cases of coronavirus over the past 24 hours. Due to increased death tolls and case numbers, many U.S. states, particularly in the South and West, have had to pause their reopening processes. On Tuesday, the state of Texas broke its daily record, reporting 6,975 new cases of COVID-19. Meanwhile, in California, more than 1,000 inmates have tested positive for coronavirus in the state's oldest prison, San Quentin, according to local authorities. Prime Minister Boris Johnson vowed to deliver an infrastructure revolution to help the country out of the economic downturn. Let's find out how. Joining us live is J.L. Bautista from our EBC UK Bureau.
Hello, Alma.
Hello, J.L.
Yes, that's right. Prime Minister Boris Johnson pledged on Tuesday to deliver an infrastructure solution that could help Britain build its way out of the economic devastation of its coronavirus lockdown. Let's listen in.
Make a speech about, as I say all this, that it sounds like a prodigious amount of government intervention. It sounds like a New Deal. And all I can say is, if that is so, then that is how it's meant to sound and how it's meant to be. Because that is what the times demand. A government that is powerful and determined and that puts its arms around people at a time of crisis. The dangers, as we can see in Leicester, the dangers have not gone away. The virus is out there, still circling like a shark in the water, and it will take all our collective discipline and resolve to keep that virus at bay. This government is not just committed to defeating coronavirus. This government is determined to use this crisis finally to tackle this country's great unresolved challenges of the last 3 decades. To build the homes, to fix the NHS, to solve social care, to tackle the skills crisis, to mend the indefensible gap in opportunity and productivity and connectivity between the regions of the UK, to unite and level up. And to that end, we will build. Build back better, build back greener, build back faster. First of all, you're absolutely right to say that the initial package that we're talking about is £5 billion, but that's not an insignificant sum, but that's part of a massive programme overall. £34 billion on the NHS, £14 billion on education, £100 billion on infrastructure.
His optimistic message, thin on detail and reminiscent of last year's election pledges, was overshadowed by the first local lockdown since an easing of measures was announced because of a spike in cases in the city of Leicester. Shops which only reopened 2 weeks ago after being shut for more than 3 months were forced to close again, and travel was restricted to the city in the English East Midlands. Prime Minister Johnson, however, tried to harness the can-do spirit that US President Franklin D. Roosevelt adopted when he introduced a New Deal for tackling the Great Depression 90 years ago. This is a program for jobs, because it's by building that we will get the jobs this nation needs, he said after touring a construction site in Dudley, 40 miles away in the West Midlands. He promised £1 billion for school repairs and a further £4 billion for shovel-ready projects from road maintenance to public transport in what he said was a new infrastructure revolution that will also build new homes. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you very much, JL, for your updates there in the United Kingdom. Thank you.
Thank you, Alma. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, this is JL Bautista. We live in interesting times.
To offset some of the lost revenue from international tourism in Italy, the government has launched the holiday bonus scheme. Let's find out what that is from Lovell Liwanag, joining us live from Milan, Italy. Hello, Lovell.
Hello, Alma. Yes, as we know, Italy depends on the tourism industry, which was badly hit by the pandemic. As travel to Italy restarts, the Italian government announced the so-called holiday bonus to help families and tourist activities. It subsidies travel to both Italian and international visitors. The country will have a budget of 30 million euros to revive its economy and the economy engine, both on the nationwide and regional level. The bonus funded by the government will be available from July 1 to December 31, 2020, and 150 euros for single, and it will be equal to 500 euros per family. With the IC, and the EIC is an indicator of the economic condition of the family, and it is issued by the INPS for those with income and assets in Italy. Those who will benefit are families with an income of less than 35,000 euros per year who decide to spend their summer holidays within Italy. In addition to this, the government has also set up 50 million euros fund to help businesses in the Italian tourism sector to bear the cost of the sanitation, safety, and health requirements for the facilities and individual workers. To use the holiday bonus, the beneficiary must spend it on how it should be spent. It must be paid in a single solution, and then the company must issue a special invoice to trace the tax code of the benefiting from the state incentive. 80% of the bonus will be discounted directly to the company, while the remaining 20% will subsequently be deducted from the 2021 tax return. Italy's national government is keen to keep the domestic holiday makers and their money in the country this year, and officials hope this will offset some of the lost revenue from international tourism. Back to you, Alma.
All right. So, Lovell, most EU countries have already agreed to reopen their external borders today. And this will be visitors from 15 countries. But Italy will still be keeping its travel ban in place.
Yes. Well, Italian authorities said the country would off the plan and would be keeping quarantine rules in the place for travelers coming from outside the bloc. Italian Health Minister Robert Speranza said the global situation remains very complex and that the country must prevent the sacrifices made by Italians in recent months of being in vain. As everyone knows, Italy has suffered one of the highest COVID-19 death tolls in the world and was also the first country to impose a lockdown, and we have now the spread of the virus under control. Italy has allowed free movement to and from EU and Schengen zone countries, including the UK, since June 3, and this will stay in place. Instead, the government is reportedly considering police checks other than those at the borders, such as checks in hotels if it is found that a person has arrived from a non-EU country, they will have to remain in the quarantine for 2 weeks. That's all, Alma.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Lovell, for your updates there in Italy. Looking forward for more. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alma. Thank you. Reporting live from Milan, Italy, I'm Lovely Wynette. We live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, Greece is also trying to revive its virus-hit economy by opening to international arrivals. Joining us live from Athens is Tristan Rahino. Hello, Tristan.
Hello, Alma. Greece on Wednesday reopened flights to its flagship island destinations as it raced to salvage a portion of the annual tourism season that is vital to its economy. Over 100 flights are expected at 14 regional airports that include the popular islands of Corfu, Santorini, Mykonos, Rhodes, and Crete, airport manager Fraport said. All airports in the country are now receiving international flights, and the ports of Patras and Igoumenista will again receive ferries from Italy. Travelers are given scannable barcodes after they fill out a questionnaire with personal details, such as their country of origin and the countries they have traveled through in the last 15 days. Those who are tested will be told to isolate at the address provided on the questionnaire while waiting for the results. Greece, which has a relatively low coronavirus death toll under 200, has launched a promotional campaign to revive tourism, which accounts for a quarter of its gross domestic product, and hopes to reassure potential travelers as well as Greeks who fear a resurgence of the pandemic with the return of tourists. Tourism Minister Harry Theoharis on Tuesday signed an agreement with German tour giant TUI, aiming to bring 50% of nearly 3 million tourists the agent brought to Greece in 2019. Greece's two main airports opened last month, but more flights were allowed from July 1 from non-EU countries. The European Union gave approval on Tuesday to leisure or business travel from 14 countries outside its borders. From its initial safe list, it excluded Russia and the United States, both significant tourism markets for Greece. Greece is following EU directives on who is allowed into the country. Direct flights from Britain, Sweden, and Turkey will not be permitted until July 15. Back to you, Alma.
Okay, so when you say, Tristan, when you say international arrivals, does this mean only air travel?
Greek tourism makes its debut today, opening its borders by air, sea, and road to travelers. Starting on July 1, all of Greece's airports are handling direct international flights from Algeria, Australia, Canada, Georgia, Japan, Montenegro, Morocco, New Zealand, Rwanda, Serbia, South Korea, Thailand, Tunisia, and Uruguay. This is according to an EU decision on Tuesday, with the expectation of flights to and from United Kingdom, Sweden, and Turkey, which according to the newly released NOTAM will apply until July 15. With regard to non-Europeans, the Civil Aviation Authority notes that until further notice, there is temporary ban of entry to all non-EU citizens.
What about quarantine restrictions?
Passengers screened for COVID-19 based on PLF form feedback on arrival can proceed to their destination of choice, but are required to self-isolate for 24 hours at their hotels/accommodation and wait for the test result. In case of a positive outcome, the traveler will be moved to a quarantine hotel and undergo treatment. It should be reminded that under the ministry's action plan, Greece's islands are linked with the mainland through an interconnected network of emergency healthcare and medical services. If the result is negative, movement restrictions no longer apply.
All right, thank you very much, Tristan, for your updates there in Greece. Looking forward for more updates from your country. Thank you.
Thanks, Alma. I'm Tristan reporting live from Athens, Greece, and we live in interesting times.
Eagle News, we'll be right back. As the coronavirus dries up global demand, confidence among major Japanese manufacturers has plunged to its worst level since the 2009 global financial crisis. Dennis Liu gives us an update. Joining us live, Dennis.
Hello, Alma. Good evening to you and to all our televiewers. Confidence among major Japanese manufacturers has plunged to its worst level since the global financial crisis. A key survey showed Wednesday as the coronavirus drives up global demand. The Bank of Japan's Tankan Business Survey poll of about 10,000 companies showed a reading of -34 among big manufacturers, the lowest since June 2009 when worldwide financial shocks hammered the planet's third largest economy. It was the biggest quarterly drop since early that year, and even worse than analysts had feared after the index turned negative in March. These figures show that companies believe it will take a long time for the economy to recover. Yoshikiyo Shimamine, chief economist at Daiichi Life Research Institute, told AFP, the coronavirus has hit Japan less hard than many advanced nations, with fewer than 1,000 deaths and about 19,000 cases. Nevertheless, the contagion has taken a bitter economic toll, knocking the country into its first recession since 2015. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has passed two record stimulus packages worth nearly $2 trillion to cushion the impact, including handing out 100,000 yen or $925 to every man, woman, and child in Japan. Data released on Tuesday showed the jobless level rose from 2.6% to 2.9%. The low unemployment figure reflects a shrinking workforce given Japan's rapidly aging population, 28% of which is 65 or over. Analysts said millions of people, especially women, had simply left the workforce during the pandemic to care for families. Millions are also on furlough, meaning that the unemployment data may be considerably less rosy than it looks, said Shimamine. Japan was struggling with the effects of natural disasters and a hike in consumption tax even before the pandemic crippled the global economy. Once it hit, there were no mandatory lockdowns in the country. The government instead asking people to stay at home, requests that were largely heeded. But that, coupled with a shuttering of the country's borders, battered tourism and consumer spending, especially for the hospitality industry. Meanwhile, confidence among big non-manufacturers nosedived to -17 from +8 in March, also the worst since 2009. Among large companies in the accommodation and food industries, the confidence survey showed an eye-watering -91, the worst since comparative data became available in 2004. The short-term business sentiment survey reports the difference between the percentage of firms that are upbeat, and those that see conditions as unfavorable. A negative reading means more companies are pessimistic than optimistic. It is considered to be the broadest indicator of how Japan Incorporated is faring. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Dennis, for your updates there in Japan. Thank you, EBC Japan Bureau.
Thank you very much, Alma, reporting live from Tokyo, Japan. This is Dennis Liu. We live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, aviation authorities have proposed a travel bubble scheme for international flights in Vietnam. Ralph Wandolph Empire reports.
Aviation authorities proposed travel bubble scheme to resume international flights. The Civil Aviation Authority of Vietnam has proposed a travel bubble be set up with countries having contained the novel coronavirus to resume tourism and economic activities. The CAAV said in a recent proposal to the Transport Ministry, regular flights to and from certain safe countries should be resumed at the end of July without specifically mentioning which country. A country is defined as safe if it does not record community transmission in 30 consecutive days. Passengers need to have stayed in this country for at least 30 days and need to provide a certificate showing they tested negative for the virus within 3 days before flights. Transit passengers are not allowed. Upon arrival in Vietnam, passengers will need to undergo a quick test paid for by the airline. They will then be quarantined for 14 days at a paying facility appointed by authorities. Business people, experts, students, and tourists should be eligible for this travel bubble scheme, the CAAV proposed. Dean Viet Thang, CAAV director, said some Taiwan airlines have proposed to resume flights to Vietnam. Local airlines are also ready to resume international flights, he added. Vietnam, which has gone 74 days without community transmission, is now allowing experts and high-skilled workers to enter the country with a 14-day mandatory quarantine. Tourists, however, are still banned from entering the country. Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc said last week Vietnam was not yet ready to open up to international tourists, and authorities need to prevent a second wave of the novel coronavirus from breaking locally. This is Ralph Wandolp Empire bringing you the latest updates here in Vietnam. We live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, European aircraft maker Airbus said it is planning to cut around 15,000 jobs worldwide, 11% of its total workforce, in response to the gravest crisis the industry has ever seen caused by the pandemic. The cuts are to be implemented by the summer of 2021, according to an Airbus statement, and follow a drop of nearly 40% of the commercial aviation business in recent months. With air traffic not expected to recover to pre-COVID levels before 2023 and potentially as late as 2025, Airbus now needs to take additional measures to reflect the post-COVID-19 industry outlook, it added in their statement. The company also said 5,000 positions would be cut. France, 5,100 in Germany, 900 in Spain, 1,700 positions in Britain, and 1,300 positions at Airbus' other worldwide sites. In a sign of the controversy that may be ahead, the French Economy Ministry said the number of job cuts was, quote, excessive, and urged Airbus to do everything to limit the number of forced departures. The French government earlier this month pledged 15 billion euros for the country's aviation industry in a bid to preserve jobs. The sector has been hammered by the travel restrictions imposed to contain the outbreak, with firms worldwide still uncertain when they will be able to get grounded planes back into the air.
The profitability of most airlines is around about 4%.
China on Wednesday slammed international criticism over a controversial new security law for Hong Kong, saying other countries should keep quiet. Beijing officials have rebuffed the criticism. Let's take a look.
而这部法律本身就是继香港基本法之后，中央为香港专门制定的第二部重要法律。它体现了全面准确贯彻“一国两制”方针的总要求。 把“一国两制”的原则和底线进一步法律化，我认为这部法律确实可以扭转乾坤，产生变局效果。用一句话来概括就是依法可安湘江。这一部法律就可以安定香港。 至于你刚才说到，有的国家现在声称要对中方一些官员采取严厉制裁的措施，我觉得这是强盗逻辑。我们现在做的是在制定中华人民共和国的一个地方行政区域的 维护国家安全的法律，这个关你什么事情？这完全是我们的内政，我又没有去招惹你没招你惹你，你凭什么对我动粗啊？当然了，我们也不是吓大的。
Donald Clark, an expert on Chinese law at George Washington University, wrote in an analysis that if you've ever said anything that might offend China or Hong Kong authorities, stay out of Hong Kong now. A major cause of concern, Mr. Clark said, was Article 38, which states national security offenses committed overseas, even by foreigners, can be prosecuted. Non-residents under Article 38, and this could mean that foreigners could be arrested on arrival in Hong Kong if they are suspected of breaking the new law. The law outlines 4 offenses: subversion, secession, terrorism, and colluding with foreign forces to undermine national security. Analysts said the descriptions of the 4 crimes were loosely worded, potentially outlawing a host of views and actions. One example of a terror act is attacking public transport, something protesters often did last year. but it also includes providing support or assistance for such acts, and they can be considered terrorism. Beijing will establish a new security office in Hong Kong with its own law enforcement personnel, neither of which would come under the local authorities' jurisdiction. Some trials will be heard behind closed doors. Beijing will also have power over how the law should be interpreted, and not any Hong Kong judicial or policy body. If the law conflicts with any Hong Kong law, the Beijing law takes priority. And Taiwan on Wednesday opened a new office to deal with Hong Kongers wanting to move to the island after Beijing passed a sweeping security law for the city. Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen had pledged a humanitarian action plan after Chinese authorities announced the proposed law, which was passed on Tuesday. The Taiwan-Hong Kong Office for Exchanges and Service in Taipei will, among other tasks, handle applications from Hong Kongers seeking to stay in Taiwan for political reasons. Around 5,000 Hong Kongers moved to Taiwan last year as the city was shaken by massive anti-government protests, and they included activists seeking sanctuary and others looking to pursue a new life in Taiwan, considered one of Asia's most progressive democracies. Taiwan's government said it will cover necessary expenses for those who come to the island for political reasons because their freedom and safety are under threat. Taiwan doesn't have an asylum or refugee law, and the cabinet still will make the final decision in such applications on a case-by-case basis. And Canada warned its citizens in Hong Kong that they faced a higher risk of arbitrary detention and extradition to mainland China after Beijing imposed a new security law on the city. The warning illustrates Western governments' heightened concern for citizens under the new law that criminalizes subversion, secession, terrorism, and colluding with foreign forces. Relations between Ottawa and Beijing are at their lowest point in years following a row over the fate of arrested nationals. Canadian former diplomat Michael Kovrig and businessman Michael Spavor were both detained 9 days after Canada arrested Chinese Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou following an American extradition request. The two men have been held largely incommunicado since December 2018 and slapped with spy charges weeks after a Canadian judge ruled that extradition proceedings against Meng will go ahead. Beijing has made little secret of the fact that the two men's fates are tied up with Meng's. And finally, in our news, the U.S. Space Force will have a command unit known as SPOC, raising eyebrows from Star Trek fans. The United States new Space Force military wing revealed that one of its units will be named Space Operations Command, or SPOC for short, in an echo of pointy-eared Star Trek character Spock. An earnest statement from Space Force unveiled its organizational structure, but made no reference to Spock's fictional predecessor, who was the unflappable science officer on the Starship Enterprise. Spock will be the primary force provider of space forces and capabilities for combatant commanders, coalition partners, the joint force, and the nation. The statement said, adding Spock would be headquartered at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado. In the Star Trek television series and movies, Spock is a half Vulcan alien, half human character, known for the catchphrase highly illogical, who was most famously played by Leonard Nimoy. President Trump, who has described space as the world's newest warfighting domain, founded Space Force as the country's sixth military branch after the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, and Coast Guard. And the Spock unit is not the force's first brush with Star Trek. When Trump unveiled Space Force's logo in January, the design was also widely compared to the Star Trek insignia of the franchise's Starfleet, a fictional peacekeeping and exploration force of the United Federation of Planets Alliance. The logo has appeared as a pin on the uniforms of Spock and fellow crew member Captain Kirk ever since the sci-fi classic debuted in 1966. And before we go, may we leave you with a word of hope. Together, All right, before we close, we leave you with a word of hope. At the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. See you again tomorrow evening. Good night. Amal Angeles will live in interesting times.